My methods are a charming relic of a bygone era, she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. 22 years as head librarian for the city. Gone in 22 minutes. Adriana Velez, our new city manager, all sharp angles and sharper ambition, delivered the news in the sterile, glass-walled conference room on the 14th floor of City Hall, a place I usually only visited for budget approvals. We need a leader, she continued, tapping a sleek tablet, who can pivot our libraries into fully digital community hubs. Your passion for physical collections, Elias, while admirable, is holding back our progress towards a smart city, digital access-first future. The shock was a cold fist in my gut, but years of managing public inquiries and occasionally unruly patrons had taught me composure. I nodded slowly, my gaze steady on hers. No shouting, no begging, just quiet dignity. Inside, my mind reeled. 22 years, my whole career dedicated to building this city's library system from a dusty, underfunded network into a vibrant, welcoming heart of the community, all undone by a PowerPoint presentation and a thirst for disruption. As I walked out, clutching a standard severance packet, the silence of the elevator felt deafening. The city skyline, usually a source of pride, seemed to mock me. The signs had been there, of course, subtle at first, then increasingly blatant. It started about 6 months after Adriana Velez took office, fresh from some tech-driven urban redevelopment project on the West Coast. First, the new city-wide digital engagement metrics were rolled out suddenly. The number of e-book downloads and website unique visitors mattered more than program attendance or the circulation of actual physical books, the kind people held in their hands. My detailed reports on rising community literacy rates and packed children's story hours were met with polite nods and questions about our social media footprint. Then, the budget for physical acquisitions, the lifeblood of any growing collection, was slashed without meaningful consultation. The funds redirected to expensive, often underutilized e-resource subscriptions dictated by her office. The third and perhaps most personal blow was when my long-planned City Reads intergenerational literacy program, a project years in the making and with significant community backing, was abruptly put under strategic review by Adriana's chief of staff. I knew then, deep down, that my vision of the library as a balanced ecosystem of print, digital, and human connection was on a collision course with her purely digital, data-driven agenda. The final nail was the embedding of a digital innovation consultant, a slick young man who spoke exclusively in buzzwords within the library system, ostensibly to facilitate modernization. He reported directly to Adriana. I started as a branch librarian in the old Northwood branch, a cramped storefront space smelling of old paper and floor wax. That was 1998. I remember the thrill of helping a young student find the exact obscure history tome she needed for her research, the quiet satisfaction of recommending a novel that would open up a new world for an elderly patron. I rose through the ranks, driven by a simple belief. Libraries are more than just buildings with books. They are sanctuaries of knowledge, engines of opportunity, and centers of community. My proudest achievement was spearheading the campaign for and overseeing the complete renovation and expansion of the historic Central Library. We transformed it from a decaying mausoleum into a light-filled, accessible hub, meticulously integrating cutting-edge technology while lovingly preserving its architectural heritage. We launched digital literacy classes, a maker space, and even a seed library. Another project close to my heart was the Wheels of Wonder mobile library service, taking books, internet access, and a friendly face to underserved neighborhoods and senior centers. It wasn't about nostalgia. It was about ensuring everyone had access to the tools of learning and discovery, in whatever forms suited them best. My methods were rooted in understanding people, in the art of a curations, not just aggregation of data. The conflict was fundamental. I saw libraries as vibrant community centers, essential public squares where human connection and the pursuit of knowledge, both tangible and digital, coexisted and enriched each other. Adriana Velez and her team, however, viewed libraries primarily as content delivery platforms. Physical spaces were expensive overhead, human interaction was inefficient. Their gospel was data scalability and a relentless push for digital-only solutions. My emphasis on robust physical art collection development, diverse in-person programming, and the unique role of skilled librarians in fostering information literacy was dismissed as legacy thinking. She once told me in a budget meeting, "Elias, we can't let sentimental attachment to paper get in the way of quantifiable progress. The future is seamless digital access." I argued that a community's soul couldn't be quantified by click-through rates, that the serendipity of browsing a shelf or the guidance of a trusted librarian held immeasurable value. It fell on deaf ears. The marginalization intensified in the months leading up to my dismissal. I was systematically excluded from key strategic planning meetings concerning the library system's future technological infrastructure, decisions made by people who'd never spent a day behind a reference desk. My direct reports, experienced branch managers I'd mentored for years, started getting summoned to meetings with Adriana's staff, often without me even being sixed on the invitation. It was a classic divide-and-conquer tactic. A major grant proposal I'd painstakingly developed with the local university to digitize and expand our unique local history archive, a project with huge community and scholarly significance, was indefinitely postponed by Adriana's office, citing resource reallocation for priority digital initiatives. The most telling sign was when Lena Hansen, a bright young librarian I'd been grooming for a leadership role, specializing in digital services, but with a deep respect for traditional library values, was abruptly reassigned. She was told to report directly to Adriana's digital innovation consultant on all digital outreach initiatives, effectively bypassing my authority and siloing her considerable talents. The message was clear: my influence was being systematically dismantled. The day after my termination, I sat in my home study, surrounded by my own beloved books, the phone strangely silent. I hadn't told anyone yet, not even my wife Sarah, who was visiting her sister. The news felt too raw, too personal. Then the calls started. First, old Mrs. Henderson from the Friends of the Library group, her voice quivering with disbelief. Then, Dr. Alastair Finch, head of the history department at the university, expressing his outrage. But the call that resonated deepest came from Marcus Cole, the respected president of the City Historical Society. We'd collaborated on countless projects over the years. "Elias, what in God's name are they thinking?" he boomed, no preamble. "You are the library to this city?" "Our joint project to digitize the city archives. Who's going to champion that now? Those digital kids they've brought in wouldn't know a primary source from a pop-up ad." His words, and the dozens of similar messages that followed from community leaders, local authors, and ordinary patrons, were a balm to my bruised ego. They saw my value, even if City Hall didn't. My worth wasn't just tied to a job title. It was built on years of trust, deep community connections, and a genuine passion for service. Perhaps a tiny seed of an idea began to sprout. I could still serve that community, just not from inside City Hall's machine. A week later, I sat across from Benjamin. Ben Carter, an attorney Sarah had recommended, his office filled with the reassuring scent of old legal tomes and brewing coffee. He reviewed my severance agreement, a fairly standard document, but with a non-compete clause that initially seemed restrictive. "They can't stop you from working," Ben said, adjusting his glasses. "This non-compete, it's specifically about taking a similar role in another city, funded library system, or a directly competing municipal cultural institution within a 50-mile radius for 1 year. It doesn't prevent you from consulting for private nonprofits, community foundations, or even advising smaller towns outside that direct competitive sphere. Your knowledge and experience are yours, not the city's." He tapped the clause. "They're trying to prevent you from directly poaching their staff or programs, which you wouldn't do anyway, but helping other organizations. That's fair game." A weight lifted. The city saw my experience as a threat to be contained. Ben helped me see it as an asset I could deploy differently. The idea that had been a tiny seed began to unfurl. What if I could help those smaller, often under-resourced libraries, archives, and community organizations that were struggling to navigate the changing landscape? What if I could help them blend the best of traditional values with smart, appropriate technology, without losing their soul in the process? 2 weeks later, Marcus Cole called again. "Elias, we're in a bit of a bind at the Historical Society. he said, his voice laced with frustration. We finally got that grant to digitize the Patterson photographic collection, thousands of glass plate negatives, priceless stuff. But honestly, we're drowning. We have the artifacts, but no real expertise to manage a project of this scale. The city's new digital gurus are all talk and no substance when it comes to actual Isidar's archival preservation. He paused. Would you consider consulting for us? Help us shape this project, find the right vendors, ensure it's done to proper archival standards. We can pay a decent consulting fee. I hesitated for a moment, the sting of my dismissal still fresh. But this was different. This was Marcus, a trusted colleague. This was a project I believed in. I'd be honored, Marcus, I said. We carefully structured the engagement a project-based consultancy for a private non-profit, clearly outside the scope of my non-compete. The work was invigorating. We developed a solid plan, secured a specialized digitization vendor, and started training volunteers. The project was a resounding success, preserving a vital piece of city history. Word began to spread quietly through the tight-knit network of smaller cultural organizations. Elias Thorne was available, and he knew how to get things done. A few weeks into my work with the Historical Society, I received a call from Lena Hansen, my former mentee at the library. Elias, can we meet? Somewhere discreet, she asked, her voice hushed. We met at a small out-of-the-way coffee shop. Lena looked stressed. It's a mess, Elias, she said, stirring her lad agitatedly. They're trying to implement a new city-wide digital catalog system. One size fits all, and it's completely incompatible with half our specialized collections, the local history archives, the rare book room. The staff is demoralized. Patron complaints about the new interface and missing records are through the roof. Adriana and her team, they just keep talking about synergy and disruption, blaming resistance to change and legacy system issues for every problem. She sighed. They're so focused on website hits and social media engagement that they've forgotten what a library is for. Circulation of physical books is down 30% since you left, and program attendance is falling because they've cut experienced programmers. Her information, painful as it was to hear about the institution I loved, was a stark validation. My decision to forge an independent path wasn't just a necessity. It was increasingly looking like the right one. The city's progress was eroding the very foundations of its library service. The call came on a rainy Tuesday morning. It was Councilwoman Davies, one of the few city council members who had consistently championed the libraries and understood my approach. Elias, she began, her tone cautious, Adriana Velez is under considerable fire. The latest library performance metrics are alarming. There's serious talk among the council about the direction things are going. Some of us are quietly exploring the idea of creating a new community heritage advisor role, a senior advisory position, something that could, potentially, bring you back in to help steer the ship, fix this mess. The offer dangled a chance to return, to salvage what I'd built. For a moment, I was tempted. The thought of restoring the library system to its former strength, of working with the dedicated staff again, was undeniably appealing. But then I thought of the compromises, the endless battles with a bureaucracy that fundamentally misunderstood the mission. I'd be working under the same system, perhaps even used to legitimize Adriana's flawed strategies with my presence. Councilwoman, I said, choosing my words carefully, I appreciate your confidence more than I can say. But I've embarked on a new path now, with commitments to several organizations that I intend to honor. I declined, politely but firmly. It felt like closing one door and decisively opening another. The success of the Historical Society project, coupled with the insights from Lena and the calls I was receiving from other struggling small institutions, crystallized an idea that had been forming. It wasn't enough to consult project by project. These organizations faced similar challenges: limited budgets, lack of specialized expertise, the pressure to go digital without losing their unique identities. What if they could pool their resources, share knowledge, and support each other? I envisioned a cooperative, a network. I called Marcus Cole first. Marcus, what if we created something new? Not just a consultancy, but a community knowledge cooperative, a network for independent libraries, archives, small museums. We could share expertise in grant writing, digital preservation and community programming, even negotiate joint purchasing for specialized software or services that none of us could afford alone. I then sketched it out for the director of a small town library struggling with outdated tech, and the curator of a tiny ethnic museum desperate to digitize their fragile photo collection. Their response was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. They were tired of top-down solutions that didn't fit their needs. This was grassroots, collaborative, empowering. The Community Knowledge Cooperative, launched 3 months later with 5 founding members, the City Historical Society, 2 small suburban libraries, a local arts archive, and a volunteer-run heritage museum. We rented a modest co-working space, a far cry from my old expansive office at Central Library, but buzzing with energy. We focused on practical support, joint grant applications, shared training workshops on using metadata for better online discovery, and a collective bargaining approach to software vendors. Word spread organically. Small-town libraries, university special collections departments, niche museums, organizations that felt overlooked by larger funding bodies and served by generic tech solutions, started calling. Within 6 months, we had 15 member organizations. We secured a significant multi-year grant from a major regional foundation, impressed by our innovative, collaborative model for grassroots cultural preservation and our commitment to the concept of a digital commons for community heritage. A National Library Journal ran a feature on us, calling it a new model for sustaining cultural heritage in the digital age. I wasn't a head librarian anymore, but I was helping more communities preserve and share their stories than ever before. Meanwhile, the news from the city's library system, mostly gleaned from frustrated former colleagues and increasingly critical local news reports, was grim. The much-vaunted Digital Access First initiative had led to a precipitous drop in actual community engagement. Key metrics like in-person visits, program attendance, and even the use of specialized research databases, which required librarian assistance, now hard to find, were tanking. A crucial bond issue for much-needed library infrastructure upgrades across the branches was now in serious jeopardy due to plummeting public confidence. Adriana Velez was facing intense scrutiny from the city council and scathing editorials in the local paper. The once proud city library system, the flagship I had poured my life into, was now perceived as struggling and out of touch, a stark contrast to the dynamism and growing national reputation of our little cooperative. The irony wasn't lost on me. Our cooperative continued to grow. We hired a small core staff, a brilliant young grant writer, a part-time tech support specialist, and an experienced volunteer coordinator. We developed best practice guides for small archives, ran workshops on community oral history projects, and even launched a shared platform for members to showcase their digitized collections. I found myself invited to speak at regional and national conferences, not as a representative of a large institution, but as a voice for a different way of thinking about knowledge, community, and technology, one built from the ground up, responsive to real needs. It was about empowering institutions, not imposing systems. Our influence wasn't measured in the size of our budget, but in the tangible success of our member organizations. One afternoon, while reviewing a successful joint digitization project report with the director of a small rural museum, a member of our cooperative, I got an unexpected call. The caller ID showed City of Hanar City Mayor's office. It was the mayor himself. "Elias," he said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "We have a problem. A big one. Adriana Velez submitted her resignation this morning. The library system is, well, it needs a complete rethink. The council and I were wondering if you would consider coming back, perhaps as an interim director, or even in a broader role to help us chart a new course. Name your terms." This was the ultimate reversal. The organization that had cast me out was now asking for my help to save it. I thought of the dedicated staff still there, the communities relying on those branches. But I also thought of the cooperative, the vibrant network we'd built, the trust and momentum. "Mr. Mayor," I said calmly, "I appreciate the offer, and I'm always willing to offer advice to the city I love. However, my primary commitment now is to the Community Knowledge Cooperative and its members. We're building something special here. something that I believe offers a sustainable future for many cultural organizations. I offered to have the cooperative consult on specific challenges, but made it clear my leadership was no longer on the table for the city system. I hung up the phone and looked around our bustling, slightly chaotic office. Lena Hansen, who had joined us 6 months prior after finally having enough of the city's mismanagement, caught my eye and smiled, having overheard my side of the call. "Full circle, huh?" she mouthed. I nodded. Later that day I drove out to a quiet park overlooking the river, a place I often went to think. There was no anger, no desire for vindication, just a deep, quiet satisfaction. Being fired had been a shock, a painful severing. But it had also been a liberation. It forced me to reevaluate my worth, to see that my true value wasn't tied to a grand title or a big office, but to my principles, my relationships, and my ability to connect, empower, and build. Sometimes the old ways, when infused with fresh purpose and a collaborative spirit, become revolutionary. The real transformation wasn't about fancy tech. It was about remembering that knowledge at its heart is a human endeavor, best nurtured by people who care, working together. And that was a foundation an algorithm could never replicate.